a lot of us are preparing our CapEx and OpEx budgets for 2024. So really thought it was a good opportunity just to make all our very important customers aware of our new Stratex solution and how it may be able to assist with this difficult task of producing CapEx budgets for 2024. I think we're all aware that capital budgeting has always been challenging, and I think we all agree that it's never been harder than it is today. With the whole macroeconomic environment so uncertain with pandemics and wars and the the rapid pace of technology change, particularly AI, and how that's impacting everything. Extreme weather events, energy crises, supply chain blockages, inflation, etc. Who knows what the future holds? All the metrics that we apply to our capex proposals, all our input costs and discount rates, everything is in flux. So really knowing what to invest in and how much it's going to cost is really challenging. The key difference, I think, between OpEx budgets and our CapEx budgets is that our OpEx budgets are easy to uh, monitor and know when we're going awry. The impact of overspending is immediate. The big challenge with capital expenditure budgets is the consequences of our decisions really impact the performance of the organization, not in the current year, but sometimes for decades to come. Yeah. So it's a real long-term view of what's going to make a difference to the achievement of, organizational objectives. Many organizations approach the capex budgeting what I call on a budget bucketing basis. So it's really based on the investments that were made in prior periods, again, maybe decades ago, that are now reaching the end of the useful life, kind of approximating the depreciation charge in the P&L. If you're not replacing your assets at the same rate that you're depreciating them, you're probably going backwards. So you kind of have a baseline number that you're working towards, nominally represented sometimes by a wish list of projects to justify that budget bucket. But essentially, we see a lot of organizations, with a fixed number in mind. They know the number, it's 40 million or 100 million or a billion, capex budget. And then what happens during the year is capital expenditure requests are raised to consume some of that budget. And every request is kind of evaluated based on its business case, and decisions to approve or defer that capex request are made. I guess the big problem with budget buckets is that the bucket might run empty before the end of the year, and you might just have approved a project last week and regret it because a better project has emerged this week. So the goal of zero-based budgeting, roughly stated, is to try and get an overall perspective of all the project opportunities out there, and then to apply a portfolio management view to those requests and really say which are your most um, critical projects to undertake in 2024 and allocate budgeting accordingly, recognizing that there's some very worthy projects that we just don't have time or money to complete. So that zero-based budgeting really comes down to having a broad perspective of all things that are possible, how they align to your strategy, and then making some critical prioritization decisions as to what is going to make the budget or not. So I'm going to give a poll a go. If we can try this, do you experience any of these challenges with regard to capital budgeting? So I don't know if that poll has popped up, but if you could just take a moment to consider that. It's a multiple choice, so you don't have to only vote for one. But if you can give us some feedback as to, from your perspective, what is the biggest challenge you're experiencing with regard to capital budgeting for 2024 or in general every year? For some customers, I see it's taking too long. Projects tend to take longer than estimated. I think there's some real facts around that. I think the Project Management Institute say 13% of budget is actually wasted. That project's expenditure is is incurred for no value derived. Missing out on important projects. It's not clear whether the projects made the cut or not, and a heavy reliance on spreadsheets. Yeah, I think we're seeing some patterns emerge that we're all, if I can share that, experiencing different challenges in our capital budgeting activities, but there are challenges to overcome with regard to capital budgeting. When we look across the capital budgeting and project execution life cycle, from the very early identification of project ideas through their business case development and ultimately the project selection, execution, closeout, and review, it's worth to understand where we can really impact the success of our capital investments and what the relative cost to change those decisions is. Now, what we find is as we go through that project delivery life cycle, the ability to influence the outcome decreases and the cost, to change direction increases. At the end of the day, you're stuck with what you decided to do, but the opportunity to make the biggest impact onto the effectiveness of your allocation of scarce time and money really is right up front at the beginning of the cycle. That said, selecting the projects to include in the budget and making those tough decisions as what to defer is challenging, because if that project on the margin, that project B in our case of a very simple 3-project portfolio, ends up to be a failure, the net cost to the organization is not just the waste incurred on project B, but also the missed out opportunity that project C might have represented to the organization. So we really got these two fundamental problems: not picking lemons, that we regret that we did project B, it was a waste of money, and the second problem is missing out on project C, which might have been so much better. So for many of our customers, the solution is kind of threefold. One, we want to have as broad a perspective as we can of all the potential capital project investments. We don't want to wait for the business cases to come through one at a time. We want to collect that whole view, that whole broad perspective as wide as we can. Who knows where that great idea will come from as to how we can radically, improve the efficiency of our operations or our commercial success or achieving our strategic goals. So let's broaden the funnel of project selection, or sorry, project submissions. The next thing is we need to whittle those down pretty quickly into a priority project portfolio, and we need to have a way of doing that, right? It can be too onerous to expect a central committee to wade through every prospective CapEx initiative on first principles and presentations. It can take too long and be too subjective. So the idea is applying some form of methodology to evaluate each project on its merits. And the most important dimension to that is strategic alignment, right? How in line with our goals is this particular investment, whether it's makes money or not. If it's not going in the down the path that we want to go as an organization, it's going to attain a lower priority than a project that's critical to the achievement of our strategic objectives. Each project has to be measured on its relative merits, naturally, financial and non-financial, and I think that's a key point. A lot of our projects types these days are more around ESG initiatives than purely financial, and being able to evaluate those non-financial outcomes alongside the financial outcomes when considering the benefit of a particular initiative is vitally important. Risk is inherent in project delivery, so we have to measure that objectively. So we, all things being equal, we pick the least risky projects. And urgency. Good projects can sometimes be deferred and done next year. They're going to return equivalent results next year. Other projects are time critical. If we don't do it now, we're going to experience problems with business as usual activities, or we're going to miss out on really time sensitive commercial opportunities. So having an understanding of the urgency of projects is important to ultimately determining some kind of a effective project rating and prioritization that can then help you um, optimize what we call our project portfolio for delivery. Unfortunately, we do live in a land of constraints of, and I think I'll stress this point, both financial capital and human resources. Yeah, we just can't do everything we would like to. Okay, so let's go and practice your emojis. Who can click an emoji that says yes, we use Excel extensively in our capital budgeting process? Yeah, well, one thumbs up. Oh, there's only one person using, oh no, there's a few more. I'd suspect that every one of us on the call today uses Excel in our budgeting process, yeah? Whether it's OpEx or CapEx or business case development, Excel is the critical tool of trade. That being the case, we have to face the facts that risk Excel has some severe limitations, yeah? For me, one of the biggest ones is simply the amount of data that you can capture in an Excel spreadsheet in one row. So what one row implies is that there's only ever one solution to a problem. You're only going to get a request, for a new Tesla. It doesn't really describe the problem and the expected outcome and the fact that there might be options to getting from A to B. Yeah, there could be a scooter or a bicycle or a motorbike or a forward, right? We don't necessarily have to go for the gold-plated solution. And just by virtue of the fact that Excel, is a single line in a spreadsheet, you sometimes miss out on that subtlety around, you know, the development of the options to give the decision makers the ability to say, yeah, that's a good idea. I see what you're trying to achieve, but let's go for option B rather than option A. Yeah. So having sufficient detail behind each project is important, and sometimes an Excel spreadsheet is limiting in that regard. The other big challenge with Excel spreadsheets, and I come from an auditing background, and I'm sure many of you will appreciate that, is formulas, are risky, yeah, because inevitably they get corrupted. They don't extend just quite far enough, or somebody misinterprets the how to complete the spreadsheet and the subtotals. And the smarter the spreadsheet, the more likely it is to become corrupted over time. The data input is of questionable quality, and the KPIs that get produced all appear to be very scientific, but the number of times we've uncovered simple formulaic errors in the spreadsheets that are driving major capital investments is quite scary. And finally, for many of us, it's the simple administration and the management of multiple versions of data locked away in spreadsheets. The idea of a single source of truth um, is a powerful one, because it means we're all looking at the same data at the same time. When we're all looking at different spreadsheets produced in at different times, and no one's quite sure what the final agreement is. What was finally in the budget? What was the final justification? What was the agreed costing of an item? It's onerous to manage spreadsheets without extensive version numbers, document management systems, and then somebody's job is really to compile all of those and create the master list, which typically remains in their hands, because sharing that too broadly just perpetuates the problem of data management. So um, if I ask one more poll question, thinking about your CapEx budgeting process and the problems that you've experienced, there's a couple of suggestions here around where you might want to make improvements. Yeah. Do you think that there's problems at the beginning collecting those ideas, or are you suspicious about the quality of the business cases that you're presenting to management? Um, are you comfortable with the agility, I guess, of your project portfolio that you've selected, that given those uncertain times that we're facing, with pressure on, the need to adopt net zero climate change policies and reduce our emissions, is that being fairly weighted against the imperative to respond to competitive pressures in the supply chain and bring work back on shore? Okay, so we've got some interesting results. Looks like the timeliness and accuracy angle of the reporting is a key one, and flowing through to that performance monitoring of project success. I think that's a good point because sometimes there's a big gap between the budget that's prepared now and the analysis that's done, in June 2024 retrospectively. And the projects that we thought we were going to do 15 months ahead of the end of the financial year are sometimes very different to what we end up doing. And it's the ability to reconcile, the project portfolio that's planned and prioritized with the project portfolio that's actually done, and understanding where those differences emerged and why they emerged and whether they were good changes of tack or not, um, is important. All right, so let's hide that, and I'm going to show you our Stratex solution. Bravely do a live demo. So the whole purpose of Stratex is to try and address all those challenges, yeah, of collecting ideas and converting those into budget proposals, and ultimately converting those budget proposals into fully fledged business cases, which go through our capital expenditure request process and create projects which can be executed, right? So it's really starting at the very beginning with an idea and tracking it through to an asset. But I thought that seeing as we're in the budgeting cycle, I'm going to really just talk about the budget submission step, right? And wearing the hat of a departmental manager during the budgeting cycle, how do they identify the projects that they want to put forward? And how does that process managed between a departmental budget being submitted to the CapEx controller, the CapEx controller having the broader perspective of all the project budgets for each of the areas, and being able to iterate a few times so that we can, you know, agree as an organization what the priority initiatives need to be, and what's made it in from each department on the basis of some objective metrics. So as the Houston um, manager, I'm going to look at some projects that are in my area of responsibility. So my team have put forward some proposed project initiatives. And the first thing you can see is we have different, what we call project types. So we might want to differentiate um, projects of different categories. So we might have some specific health and safety initiatives, some growth and savings initiatives, some projects, capital install-based sustenance initiatives. And we tend to encourage, you know, comparison of projects within each of the categories. It's kind of like a financial portfolio. If you go to a financial planner, they'll first talk to you about getting your asset class allocation correct. And then within those asset classes, like international equities, you'll go and pick your specific shares. And it's similar with project portfolios. Yeah, it's hard to compare a regulatory project, which you just have to do. There's kind of not much debate, with a growth and savings project, which really has to be justified on its financial merits, as opposed to a sustenance project, which is kind of hard to generate an NPV from because it's basically comes down to risk. If we don't replace a critical component of our production line, the whole thing stops. Yeah. So the benefit is enormous. The only thing we have to really consider is which replacements are most urgent, and of those, once we've picked items that to replace, we can choose, which replacement equipment we want to put in there. So you're choosing perhaps the lowest cost option to address the risk, but it's less of a focus on the expected financial return that you would want to assess for a growth and savings initiative. So in this particular example, I've got a budget capacity that's come down from my portfolio CapEx controller of 2.1 million. If I picked everything, it's going to, cost me 2.8, and that's presumably why this particular submission was rejected. So now I have to make some project prioritization decisions. I can do this manually, and I can select not to do these two stores, and I can come under the budget limit. So that's one way of doing it. I've now got the scoring capacity here, so I can. This is a calculated score for each of these projects, a standardized score. So I can sort by score and try and select the projects accordingly. With a few projects, I can probably do this by eye, yeah. But for bigger areas, what we've also got in the tool is the ability to optimize that portfolio selection automatically. So I can optimize it by score, which actually gives me a slightly different result. So the computer's doing the work for you. It's saying, based on your constraints, how do we maximize the score of these projects? Or maybe in the case of growth and savings initiative, maybe my strategy is to optimize net present value. So I can pick NPV, and it will give me a short list of projects which I should probably submit for budget approval. But what sits behind each of these initiatives um, is a comprehensive uh, investment proposal. So with a click, you know, as the departmental manager, or as we go up the chain, sponsors and portfolio managers, we all have access to a single source of truth about this initiative. Yeah, we know which budget year we're targeting, the kind of asset classification, the benefiting area. We can all have a view of who the key participants are. We can monitor the conversations that have taken place around this. We can look at the same set of source documents. We can understand how this project, was prioritized relative to options, although in this case I don't have any options. Get a summary of the project, look at costings. Behind each of these scores, there's a whole scoring um, model concept that can be applied, and can be from very simple ranking scales to heat maps. Um, of course, some of these benefit scores around net present value are built on a detailed financial analysis, and I'd love to talk you through that. We're very proud of the financial analysis capabilities built into the tool to ensure that everyone's working off common set of assumptions, yeah, common set of exchange rate assumptions, discount rate assumptions, a common way of calculating net present values and payback periods, whether they're nominal payback periods or discounted payback periods. We have a standardized set of metrics being derived from a standardized set of data and a standardized set of formulas that are very well controlled, right, across the organization. So if we do see a metric here, we can rely on it as a decision maker, knowing that there's a great deal of information behind these. I'd love to go into some more detail on how those scorings models are built and those business cases are calculated. So please, if you're interested, let's make a time for a follow-up session. But that, I guess, is Stratex in a nutshell. It's a centralized single source of data that has all the information and all the standardized scoring and all the governance around reviews and approvals to help an organization make the right project selection decisions at every level, from a departmental level to a divisional level to an enterprise level, and collaborate accordingly, and in an agile fashion. Yeah, as the budget doesn't just get set once and forgotten. If somebody comes up with a better idea, that project portfolio can be revisited and reassignments made much more dynamically. Nothing's forgotten, nothing's lost. That project, might just be deferred, and it might get rehydrated again the following year. But it's the key objective here is to make the best possible decisions with the highest quality data in the most efficient and effective way. Yeah. All right. So I'll go back to wrapping up. But I'll ask one more question. How do I hold this back to list? We're quite interested just to get some feedback um, from everyone. Uh, there's a few things that I hopefully demonstrated there. I didn't go into any much detail on them, but the idea collection is a very simple form. The proposal broadens the data selection, and then the business case is, I guess, the most complete set of data, including those financial analyses and the net present value calculations, etc. So it's a stage-gated process for collecting project justifications. Um, and for different organizations, certain features stand out. For some, it's the robustness of those business cases. For others, it's the workflow automation and making sure that the whole process is accelerated and governed. Um, what I didn't touch on, or I should have, because we're all SAP customers, is of course it's fully integrated with SAP. Yeah, so once a project is approved through Stratex, we integrate through our Fiori app builder tool, and it will go away and automatically create the project or internal order in SAP, assign the budget, bring that information back to Stratex. So we got the bidirectional link, so we always know, um, what was the basis for the decision. I think Vizzy is one of our lighthouse customers down in Melbourne, and they're really getting value out of the business case builder capabilities of Stratex and the scoring methodology which they have, and then that information is flowing into SAP ultimately as a project for project execution and control. So thanks for sharing your ideas on where you see value in that. Oh, I didn't publish it. Sorry. Looks like the project portfolio planning is standing out as a key feature. So that's great. I think that's you know a key difference between legacy budgeting processes, which are kind of based on a wish list. The wish list was quickly forgotten. What we ended up with was a bucket and a call off of CapEx requests for the rest of the year. And I think we're trying to change the dynamic to thinking about a capital budget as a living thing. It's made up of a set of projects that is continuously, reviewed and prioritized and executed to deliver optimal um, business value here. So just to summarize, the goal here is don't make bad decisions. I think a recent example, the Duke and Gorge debacle in WA, where it seemed like a good idea at the time. Yeah, the net present value stacked up, but there wasn't a full and comprehensive consideration of the strategic objectives around community engagement and environmental protection and risks of doing, and the end result wasn't so good for the organization and the people involved. Yeah, so we want to help customers not make bad decisions by giving them more consistent and justifiable set of data to make better CapEx project decisions, as well as you know making the mistake of doing the wrong things. We want to help you do the right things. The first digital cameras, for those of you who didn't know, were invented by a photographic film company called Kodak, and they thought it was a great idea, but it didn't use any Kodak film. So the immediate response of management was, "Oh, can that? Yeah, don't let anyone know about it because it'll cannibalize our business." Yet it was a really good idea, and we got to make sure that those good ideas do get um, the opportunity to be escalated, and that they are seriously considered by executive management and are not quashed too early in the project submission and assessment cycle at lower levels. So maintaining that transparency of the innovation cycle and fairness around the scoring and prioritization of initiatives can really help ensure that we're not missing out on the next great thing that'll really help the organization achieve its strategic outcomes. So, well, we got through there with 30 seconds to spare. So thank you very much again for your time today. Please reach out if any of that was of interest and you'd like to explore it more. And Yeah, thanks very much.